So the 2019 NFL Draft was a very interesting draft class. Hell, the 2019 Draft, this was the draft that initially set the NFL Draft attendance records back in 2019. With the day one attendance records and the 3-day weekend attendance records. Those were records that would stand for 5 years until the records were shattered in Detroit in 2024. And of course, like I said before, you can't really properly grade a draft class till about 4 or 5 years down the line. And 2019 was also the first year where I actually was focused on the draft process. That was the year I started doing NFL draft previews on this channel. Of course, those previews weren't as good or in-depth as previews you've seen today. But, still, it was the first time I was really fully in-depth into draft previews on this channel. So now, after 5 years, I think now we can go back to the 2019 draft class and see how it all panned out. So yeah, without further ado, let's revisit the 2019 NFL Draft. Pick number 1, Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray was a pretty polarizing pick in 2019 when he went first overall. Because Arizona made this selection a year after the Cardinals took Josh Rosen in the first round with the 10th overall pick in the draft. And Rosen, he did not develop it really into anything, which is why the Cardinals cut bait with him after 1 year. Even though QBs need longer development curves than any other position. But Kyler Murray, it was also another polarizing pick with Murray because he was also a top prospect for the Oakland Athletics in baseball. But Murray instead chose to stay with football. I mean, Kyler Murray's career at Arizona, it started off very promising. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019. But it seemed like Kyler Murray hit its peak in 2021. When the Cardinals made the playoffs but got blown out in the wild card round and embarrassed by a division rival in the LA Rams. A Rams team that would go on to win the Super Bowl that year. And then after that, just Murray hasn't been the same since then. Mainly 2022, he suffered an ACL injury that took him out. And then that injury carried over into a good chunk of 2023. It's very tough to say, hopefully, a new change of scenery for him could help out in Arizona with the new front office and head coach. But Murray's also locked into a long-term contract. I mean, it wasn't a bad pick here, but at the same time, it just feels like he's been a massive disappointment, especially with the expectations of being a first overall pick. Well, the one positive I could say here is he's at least better than Josh Rosen, but that bar wasn't really that high to begin with. He'll lose some points, though, because he hasn't won anything yet in this league. And that should be an expectation when you're a first overall pick. Verdict, meh. Pick number 2, San Francisco 49ers, Nick Bosa. Not much else to say about Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa has been everything as advertised since coming into the league with the 49ers. Has been an absolute monster in the pass rushing game. A former Defensive Player of the Year winner. A big part of San Francisco 49ers defense and has played a key role in both of San Francisco's runs to the Super Bowl in his career in 2019 and 2023. Not much else to say with Nick Bosa. Slam dunk pick here. Verdict, hit. Pick number 3, New York Jets, Quinnen Williams. The crazy thing about this pick is that the Jets nearly butt fumbled this pick by trading down out of this pick. But for Jets fans, they're all thanking God they didn't. Now, while Quinnen Williams didn't end up becoming the dominant defensive tackle pass rusher that he was hyped up to be coming out of Alabama in college, he still has been one of the top defensive tackles in the game regardless. And it's been a big piece of the Jets' defensive front on the D-line. Even though it hasn't really resulted in anything because the Jets have touched almost everything else they died, he's still been a big piece of the D-line. He's gotten paid for it as well. So yeah, this is no doubt a great pick for the Jets here. Now, while the Jets have butt fumbled a lot of things in their existence, this pick here was not one of those things. Verdict, hit. Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders, Clelin Ferrell at pick 4. So, Clelin Ferrell was one of the biggest surprise picks of the first round of the draft, because this was the first pick of the John Gruden, Mike Mayock experimenting with the Raiders. And yeah, he came nowhere near as advertised. He wasn't even projected to go anywhere this high in the draft process. But the Raiders wanted to surprise everybody. They wanted to surprise people so much with this pick, they even sent the scouting staff home early to hide this pick. Just to hide how fucking stupid this pick ended up becoming. Because Clelin Ferrell ended up being nowhere near as he was as advertised coming here, especially coming off the dominant defensive line Clemson had coming into this draft. Now, the Raiders, they would get their premium pass rusher later on in this draft class, but it was not here. And plus, Clelin Ferrell is now playing with Washington, as he'll most likely be a rotational defensive lineman piece on multiple teams. You don't take that kind of piece fourth overall. Honestly, Clelin Ferrell is an example of why you don't send the scouting staff home early. Verdict, bust. Pick number 5, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Devin White. Now, Devin was an interesting pick here for how his career has gone so far, because this was a player I wanted the Lions to take in the draft later on, but he never fell to Detroit in this position. Now, Devin White, his career started off pretty strong the first 3 years. He looked like a hit his first 3 years. He was even a key factor in the Tampa Bay Super Bowl run in 2020. But the last 2 years, his production has just fallen off a cliff. The last 2 years, he just hasn't looked like the same player he was back in the Super Bowl run. Just seems like he got complacent and just backed off a bit. Just lost that drive and that dog in him. There's a chance, though, that he could get back to a hit of what he once was. Maybe a change of scenery in Philadelphia now will help change that now. But if we went off the first 3 years of his career, this would easily be a hit. But we're not going off 3 years. It's about what happened in the first 5 years. And I feel like the last 2 years are going to take a hit on his grade. But it could go back to being a hit if he can revitalize himself in Philadelphia. But for now, the verdict is meh. Pick number 6, New York Giants, Daniel Jones. So, Daniel Jones was a massive reach for the Giants here. He was projected to go nowhere near the 6th overall pick until maybe a week or two before the draft, when there are rumors about him possibly going to the Giants here. Now, the Giants made this pick here based off 3 drives they saw from Daniel Jones at the fucking Senior Bowl. And for Daniel Jones, his career was pretty rocky to start off. He was pretty bad at the start. I mean, he had only one good year so far in the NFL, and that was in 2022, when he led to the Giants to a playoffs, which that Giants team was pretty mediocre as all hell. But they were able to get a playoff win on the road in Minnesota before they were bounced out in the second round by division rival Philadelphia. And last year, he did miss a bunch of last year after he got injured. But I'll be honest here, one good season in 5 years is not good enough in the NFL, especially when you're the 6th overall pick. And the expectation was here for Gettleman was that if you're going to take Jones this high, you better hope he becomes a Hall of Famer. And Jones has become nowhere near a Hall of Famer in the NFL in 5 years. Now, could Daniel Jones recapture that 2022 magic? It's possible, but I have my doubts. Sorry, I just don't make the rules here. I'm just a hard ass that enforces the shit out of him and expects better. Verdict, bust. Pick number 7, Jacksonville Jaguars, Josh Allen. And no, we're not talking about the quarterback Josh Allen with Buffalo. We're talking the other Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, he's been completely as advertised with Jacksonville, has been one of the top pass rushers in the NFL, and the Jaguars' top defensive player. I would argue one of the best players on Jacksonville right now. Just been a big part of Jacksonville's defense and how they built that up. He's even getting paid the big bucks for it too, so easily a great selection by Jacksonville. Not much else to say here. Verdict, hit. Pick number 8, Detroit Lions, T.J. Hawkinson. So, of course, this was the first real offseason of the Quinn Tricia era, back when the Lions were still hell-bent on trying to copy and skin the New England Patriots alive at all costs. And Hawkinson was brought in to be Detroit's version of Rob Gronkowski. So for Hawkinson, is he the new Rob Gronkowski? Hell no. But he was still a damn good tight end. Easily one of the top tight ends in the league. Like, let me put his career in Detroit in retrospective for you. Every time he didn't get injured, he made the Pro Bowl. Every year he was healthy, he was a Pro Bowler. The only times he didn't make the Pro Bowl were years he got injured. Now, sadly, he got shipped off to Minnesota in 2022 just because he didn't fit the new culture, Lions culture that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell were trying to build now. As now he's been shipped to Minnesota, and he's now been made the highest paid tight end in the league in Minnesota. And he still made Pro Bowls, though, his 2 years in Minnesota. Hell, last year, Hawkinson would have had his first 1,000-yard season had he not suffered a season-ending ACL injury in a Week 16 game against Detroit. Fucking crazy how that's ironic there. Fuck. So yeah, while the expectation was for him to be the new Gronkowski, he didn't make that expectation, but he was still a good pick by the Lions here at number 8. Now, while Patricia fucked up a lot of things in Detroit, this pick was not one of them. Verdict, hit. Pick number 9, Buffalo Bills, Ed Oliver. So Ed Oliver, he was compared to be the next Aaron Donald in the NFL, coming into the NFL, because he was undersized like Aaron Donald and played for a small college program in Houston. Now, it took a couple years for him to get going, but he finally had his career breakout season in 2023 with 9.5 sacks last year. Now, while Ed Oliver, he isn't a superstar defensive tackle, and he isn't Aaron Donald in any way, with how dominant Aaron Donald's been, but he has been a solid starter for the Bills, and he's still with the Bills to this day still, as he got an extension with the Bills. Like, not a superstar pick, but he's a solid starter in the league, which is about the next best option you could hit here. I mean, this pick could change into a hit in the future if he keeps it up, if he keeps building off last year. But, you know, I feel like his first 3 or 4 years are going to hamper the overall grade on this. So, for now, the verdict is meh. Pick number 10, Pittsburgh Steelers, Devin Bush. So Devin Bush, he was brought in to be the leader of the Steelers defense and being the linebacking core. And, well, Devin Bush's career started off pretty strong. He had a really good rookie season in 2019. Sadly for Devin Bush, that was like the only good year he had in the NFL, as his career tapered off after that. As it just seemed like with Devin Bush, he was just a one-year flash in the pan with Pittsburgh. Like, he would end up losing he would lose his starting job by 2023 and just be in the rotation. Now, and now he's no longer with the Steelers, as now he's signed with the Seahawks. As he almost like would be a rotational depth piece in the linebacking core for future teams. That's something you can't take with a top 10 pick. He started his career off strong, but he just looked like a one-year flash in the pan. Verdict, bust. Pick number 11, Cincinnati Bengals, Jonah Williams. So, Jonah's grading here, it really depends on how you want to grade O-lineman here. It's borderline between hit or meh. Because while Jonah Williams, he's not a sexy name or a superstar offensive tackle, he's still been a pretty reliable and serviceable starter for the Bengals. Like, he started every game he's played with the Bengals. Very solid starter, been a big part of the Bengals O-line. Not one of the flashiest players in the draft class, but still a reliable, solid starter. Now he'll be heading to the desert to solidify Arizona's offensive line. You know, not a bad pick, but not a superstar pick. He's just been the middle. Verdict, meh. Pick number 12, Green Bay Packers, Rashaad Gary. So Rashaad Gary, he was forced to sit out his first year due to dealing with some injuries he had coming out of college. But once he did stay healthy outside of his 2022 season being cut short due to an ACL injury, he's been easily one of the top pass rushers on the Packers defense, has been the big piece of the Packers defense. I would argue that Rashaad Gary is easily the best player on the Packers right now, even still on the Packers right now to this day, and been a big piece of what the Packers are trying to build on that defense. So overall with Rashaad Gary, his career started off pretty rough, but once he did get going, he's really taken off. Great pick by the Packers here at 12. Verdict, hit. Pick number 13, Miami Dolphins, Christian Wilkins. So Christian Wilkins, he was also part of that beast Clemson defensive line coming out of college during this draft class. And Christian Wilkins, he's been a big piece in the Miami Dolphins D-line, anchoring that D-line in his entire tenure with the Dolphins. Sadly for him, he did not end up getting an extension with Miami, but he did get paid the big bucks, as he's become one of the top defensive tackles in the game. Got paid the big bucks to anchor the D-line now at Las Vegas with the Raiders. Overall, though, even though he's not with the Dolphins now, still a solid pick by the Dolphins to anchor that D-line. Great pickup by Miami here. Verdict, hit. Pick number 14, Atlanta Falcons, Chris Lindstrom. Now, while O-linemen, they're not the sexiest pick in the world, they are essential for a team's offensive success. And Chris Lindstrom has been very essential with the Falcons O-line. As easily, Lindstrom is one of the best guards in the game right now. He's even gotten paid the big bucks by Atlanta for it too, as he's become one of the highest paid guards in the game. As easily, his contract reset the market for interior O-linemen in the league. A great pick by Atlanta here to anchor the O-line here. I'll be honest, when you draft a guard in the first round, it's kind of hard to fuck that kind of pickup. Verdict, hit. Pick number 15, Washington Commanders / Redskins, Dwayne Haskins. So Dwayne Haskins' tenure in Washington was a complete disaster, as he was just never really gelled into what he was supposed to be coming out of college. Like, he lost his starting job after 2020 to Taylor Heineke. Like, he spent a couple years as a backup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sadly, though, we'll never know for sure if his career would have ever got back on track, as sadly, his story had a tragic ending, as in 2022, a couple weeks before the 2022 draft, he was struck and killed by a car at a very young age. So, the big elephant in the room that needs to be addressed is that Dwayne Haskins was taken away from us way too soon. We'll never truly know if he never got back. If he could have got to where he was coming out of college. We'll never know. Especially when Dwayne Haskins said that everyone made a mistake letting him fall to Washington. Sadly, everyone made a mistake letting him go in the first round to begin with. But we will not grade this pick out of respect for him because he was taken away from us way too soon. Verdict, gone too soon. Pick number 16, Carolina Panthers, Brian Burns. So Brian Burns, he's been one of the top pass rushers in the NFL and a big piece of Carolina's defense. But unfortunately, he no longer plays for the Panthers as he was shipped off this offseason to the New York Giants for a mere measly return. Because the Carolina Panthers completely botched whatever trade value Brian Burns had throughout the last couple years. Let me just put in perspective how bad the Panthers botched Brian Burns' trade value. Because back in 2022, the Panthers turned down a trade offer from the LA Rams where the Panthers would have got 2 first-round picks from the Rams for Brian Burns. The Panthers literally looked at that offer and said that wasn't good enough, and that was back when the Rams were still saying fuck them picks. And of course, last year, Detroit offered a first-round pick for Brian Burns, and the Panthers turned that down. I mean, they turned out, but whatever the fuck New York offered them, the Panthers accepted that, and that offer had no first-round picks. I believe it was like a second and a fifth-round pick. But hey, Carolina's loss is now New York's gain, as he was also paid the big bucks in New York. Now, while the Panthers have fucked up a lot of things the last couple years, this pick with Brian Burns was not one of those things, as Brian Burns came as completely as advertised, and I say this pick was definitely a great pick for the Panthers. Verdict, hit. Pick number 17, New York Giants, Dexter Lawrence. So Big Dex was part of the defensive line, the big anchor man in that D-line for Clemson come out of college that declared for the 2019 draft. And Dexter Lawrence, he has been a big stable for Big Blue. Not just by his size, but literally has been a big stable for the Giants defensive line. Been the big anchor for that D-line. And he's got paid the big bucks for it, too. Easily one of the top defensive tackles in the game, nose tackles in the game today. And a great pickup here by New York at 17. Verdict, hit. Pick number 18, Minnesota Vikings, Garrett Bradbury. Now, while interior O-linemen aren't the sexiest pick in the world, they are essential picks for a team's success. And while for Garrett Bradbury, he's not a superstar center like the likes of Jason Kelce and Frank Ragnow are in the game today, he's still a solid, serviceable starter. He's been pretty reliable for the Vikings, a great anchor for the Vikings D-line. While not a superstar tight end, a superstar center, still a solid starter in the league. Hey, like I mentioned with the Lindstrom pick, kind of hard to fuck up these interior O-lineman picks in the first round. Verdict, meh. Pick number 19, Tennessee Titans, Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons, one of the top defensive tackles in the game. Big anchor on the Titans defensive line. Got paid the big bucks to continue anchoring that D-line. And he's easily one of the top players on the Titans right now. I'd argue that he is the best player on the Tennessee Titans now, since with Derrick Henry now leaving in the offseason to go to the Ravens. So, yeah, easily the best player on the Titans right now. A great pick by Tennessee here. Verdict, hit. Pick number 20, Denver Broncos, Noah Fant. Now, Noah Fant, he isn't a superstar tight end by any means, compared to some other Iowa tight ends that come out of Iowa, like a T.J. Hawkinson and the George Kittles or even Sam Laporta's. But he's still a solid catching tight end. He's pretty average overall. He isn't even with the Broncos anymore, as he was shipped off to Seattle in the Russell Wilson trade. But he's still been pretty solid for the Seahawks overall, catching the ball from Geno Smith with Seattle. And it's still with the Seahawks right now. So, not a bad pick by the Broncos, but, some argue it could be better. He's just average overall. Verdict, meh. Pick number 21, Green Bay Packers, Darnell Savage Jr. So, Darnell Savage, while he wasn't a highlight reel machine like some people thought he would have been coming out of college, he has been a solid coverage safety and defensive back for the Packers secondary. Not a lockdown, but he was very good at coverage overall. And, of course, he's no longer with the Packers now, as now he'll be roaming the backfield in the secondary for Jacksonville. Overall, though, in Green Bay, while he wasn't a superstar safety or defensive back, he was still a solid starter for the Packers, and he was all right for Green Bay. It was an all right pick for Green Bay. Not a superstar, but a solid starter, which is the next best thing you could have. Verdict, meh. Pick number 22, Philadelphia Eagles, Andre Dillard. So Andre with the Eagles, he struggled to make the Eagles starting lineup, as in 59 career starts in his NFL career. He's only started 19 of the 59 games he's played in. Just struggled trying to get a starting spot with the Philadelphia Eagles. Was ended up being released by the Eagles after 2022 to sign with Tennessee in 2023. And now he'll be on his third team in 3 years in 2024, as he'll be with the Green Bay Packers. Just, yeah, pretty disappointing pick for him. There was some pretty good hype around him coming out, but just ended up being a massive disappointment. Just can't seem to be a starter, and just seems destined to be a rotating piece here. Honestly, so given Philadelphia, some of Philadelphia's great old linemen like Jalen Johnson and Jason Kelce, Philadelphia could have done a whole lot better with this pick. Verdict, bust. Pick number 23, Houston Texans, Titus Howard. So, Titus Howard, it's almost for Titus Howard, you can make the same argument I made with Jonah Williams earlier on. Not a superstar tackle like the likes of Penei Sewell or Lane Johnson, or hell, even Titus's teammate in Houston, Laramie Tunsil. Still a solid, reliable starter for the Texans, which is about the next best thing you can have in the NFL as an O-lineman. And he's still at the Texans today, so yeah, not a superstar flashy tackle, but, still a solid starter overall in the league, which is about the next best thing you can ask for. Not a superstar, but not a bad pick either, just in the middle. Verdict, meh. Pick number 24, Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders, Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs was the first running back to be taken off the board here in the draft in 2019. And usually it's pretty criminal to take a running back in the first round because running back success in the NFL is usually dictated based on how good your O-line is. And for Josh Jacobs, he has actually been pretty good for the Raiders. Like, he came completely as advertised, even has led the NFL in rushing the last couple years. Of course, now he no longer plays for the Raiders, as now he'll be running in the backfield for the Green Bay Packers next in 2024. Still, overall, he came completely as advertised, and he was a great pickup by the Raiders. Now, while John Gruden and Mike Mayock fucked up a lot of things with the Raiders in their short time, this pick was not one of those things. They actually hit the nail on it. Hey, sometimes a blind squirrel can find a nut every now and then. Verdict, hit. Pick number 25, Baltimore Ravens, Marquise Hollywood Brown. So, Hollywood has not really been Hollywood in the NFL. As really, to be honest, Marquise Brown has been a pretty average wide receiver at best. Like, he's only had one 1,000-yard season in his entire career, and that was his last year with Baltimore in 2021. Other than that, he's been pretty average across the board throughout his 5-year career. Of course, now he's not with the Ravens anymore and had a brief 2-year stint with the Cardinals before now going to Kansas City for 2024. Even though he's been average in the NFL, he'll most likely get a ring with the Chiefs because that is just going to be our luck with it because the football gods are cruel bastards that demand no mercy. Verdict, meh. Pick number 26, Washington Redskins / Commanders, Montez Sweat. So to be honest with Montez should have been a top 10, top 15 pick in this draft class, but he mainly fell this low in the draft class because of the scouting combine. He had some health and heart issues that got blown way too out of proportion that tanked his draft stock. But for Washington, they're thinking they're lucky stars that it did get blown out of proportion. As with Montez, any issues that got blown out of proportion haven't mattered in the slightest, as he was one of Washington's best pass rushers on the team. I'd argue for the last couple years, he's been Washington's best player on the team. As in 4 of his 5 seasons in the NFL, he's had at least 7 sacks in a season in 4 of his 5 years in the NFL. Of course, now he's no longer with Washington, as last year he was shipped off to Chicago, as now he'll become the premium pass rusher in Chicago for the Bears defense. And he'll get paid like it too. Overall, though, in his time with Washington, he was the best player for Washington. So yeah, that's all else you need to know about this pick. It was a great pick by the Commanders. Verdict, hit. Oakland / Las Vegas Raiders, Jonathan Abram. So Jonathan Abram with the Raiders, he just struggled to get any footing with the Raiders in their secondary. Just struggled to get any footing in the secondary. And of course, he no longer plays with the Raiders. As now he'll be roaming free agency, as now his next stop will be in New Orleans with the Saints. So he'll most likely be a journeyman, as that just seems to be the luck of any defensive back safety player taken by the Raiders in the first round, where they'll just end up developing in the journeyman. And Jonathan Abram was no exception to that, as he'll most likely be a journeyman in the NFL now. Just another defensive back safety first-round prospect for the Raiders biting the dust. Verdict, bust. Pick number 28, Los Angeles Chargers, Jerry Tillery. So Jerry Tillery, he just struggled to get any footing with the Chargers defensive line, just could not be the anchor he was hyped up to be and a lot of Charger fans were hoping for when he came out of Notre Dame in college. Just struggled to get any footing. He was released by the Chargers during the 2022 season and then signed with the Raiders shortly after and just hasn't really done anything with the Raiders. And now he'll be on his 3rd team now within 3 years. So now he'll be joining the Minnesota Vikings for 2024. Just a complete disappointment overall. Verdict, bust. Pick number 29, Seattle Seahawks, L.J. Collier. So L.J. Collier was just a massive disappointment with the Seahawks overall. Just struggled to even get on the starting lineup. Like, the best season of his career with the Seahawks was in 2020, when he had 3.5 sacks. Ironically, 2020 was the only time in his tenure with the Seahawks that L.J. Collier was a starter, as after that he was taken out of the starting lineup. And now it's just will most likely be a rotational depth piece throughout the NFL. And he's no longer even with the Seahawks anymore, as now he's with Arizona to rebuild his stock. So yeah, not much else to say here. Verdict, bust. Pick number 30, New York Giants, DeAndre Baker. Well, for DeAndre's career, just struggled with the Giants secondary and only lasted 2 seasons with the Giants before he was cut after 2020. After some legal issues and having a run-in with the law. And after a brief 1-year stint with the Chiefs, DeAndre Baker was out of the league entirely after 2021. He now plays for the DC Defenders in the UFL. So, yeah, this is an easy verdict here. Bust. Pick number 31, Atlanta Falcons, Caleb McGarry. So for Caleb McGarry, wow, he hasn't been a superstar tackle by any means or nowhere near like his teammate Chris Lindstrom, who was taken in this draft in the same round. He has been a solid, serviceable, reliable starter for the Falcons, for a pretty underrated Falcons offensive line. And not only has he been a solid, reliable starter, he's also been a pretty good pass protector, too. So, yeah, while not a superstar, you know, still a solid starter, which is the next best thing you can have for the Falcons. So, you know, it was an all-right pick for here. Verdict, meh. And finally, pick 32, the last pick of the first round, New England Patriots, N'Keal Harry. So the Patriots in their history, they have struggled to develop any wide receivers they take in the first round. And N'Keal Harry was no exception, as I think the main hope with N'Keal Harry for the Patriots was that Tom Brady could make him look good. In the end, that experiment only lasted 1 year with Tom Brady leaving to go to Tampa Bay after 2019. And of course, you want to know how bad the Patriots have been at developing receivers? Here's a small list of all the receivers in this draft class taken after N'Keal Harry. Patriot fans, shield your eyes from it. Dear God, to say they fucked up is a massive understatement. And of course, N'Keal Harry, he was shipped off to Chicago in 2022, and now he plays for the Minnesota Vikings now. Just in the end, another Patriots receiver taken in the first round to bite the dust. Verdict, bust. And that, folks, was the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft Class Revisited. Overall, quite a lot of talent was taken in the first round. Although the talent pool in the first round kind of ran out of gas, though, near the end of the first round. But there was, outside of a few players, but there were still some pretty good big names taken here. But that was just the first round. How did the rest of the draft unfold from rounds 2 through 7? So let's take a look at that now. So, of course, this 2019 NFL draft class was very well known for its wide receivers, especially from rounds 2 through 5. Of course, the big headliner of that receiver class was Deebo Samuel, who was taken 36 by the 49ers. Now, when you mention Deebo Samuel in this draft class, you know damn well it was a good wide receiver draft class. Even A.J. Brown was taken in this draft class with the 51st overall pick by the Titans. Of course, A.J. Brown now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles and is making the big bucks with the Eagles, but he still did some pretty good stuff in Tennessee as well. Even DK Metcalf was taken in the second round of the draft with the 64th overall pick by the Seahawks, as DK Metcalf has been an absolute monster receiver. Although you could say he could be a lot better than what his stats may say, because if he had a better eating habit instead of the eating habit of a 5-year-old. But even despite that, he's still been one of the best players on the Seahawks without a shadow of a doubt. And a great wideout here too. And some other notable wide receivers that were taken in this 2019 draft class include the likes of McCole Hardman, Deontay Johnson, and Terry McLaurin. Even names like Hunter Renfrow and Darius Slayton have had their moments in the NFL too, and then had their time in the sun as well. Other than some receivers, some other notable second-round picks that happened in this draft class include the likes of Byron Murphy, Jawan Taylor, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Dalton Risner, Elgton Jenkins, Eric McCoy, Miles Sanders, Taylor Rapp, and Juwan Thornhill. So, of course, the third round of the draft was known as the draft on the running backs, as this was the round a lot of running backs went off the board. Of course, the main headliner of those running backs be David Montgomery, who was taken with the 73rd pick in the draft by the Chicago Bears, as he was a good part of the Bears' backfield until Justin Fields came in to push him out. Of course, David Montgomery is now with Detroit in the Lions' backfield, and playing a big part in the Lions' run game with Jahmyr Gibbs. Or just look at the very next pick taken after Montgomery at pick 74 with Devin Singletary to the Buffalo Bills, as he has played a big part in Buffalo's run game too. Of course, Devin Singletary is now with the Houston Texans to anchor that backfield up. Even other running backs taken in the 3rd round like Darrell Henderson, Damian Harris, and Alex Mattison all had their moments in the sun respectively in the NFL. Some other notable players that were taken in the 3rd round of the 2019 NFL Draft Class include the likes of Zach Allen, Draymond Jones, Jermaine Pratt, CL Takitaki, Nate Davis, Bobby Okereke, Connor McGovern, Trey Pipkins, Jamel Dean, Dawson Knox, and Quincy Williams all taken in this round. Now to round 4 of the draft, there were only 2 notable players that highlighted round 4 of this draft class. Of course, the first one being, of course, the Raiders getting their premium pass rusher with Max Crosby at the 106th pick, who it was better than who they took at 4th overall at Clelin Ferrell, as Max Crosby is easily one of the best players on the Raiders right now, one of the top pass rushers in the league, and is on the trajectory towards the NFL Hall of Fame. Even Tony Pollard was taken in this round at the 128th pick and was a great stable in the capped Dallas Cowboys backfield. Of course, now Pollard will be heading to Tennessee to anchor that backfield with the departure of Derrick Henry there. Some other notable players that were taken in the 4th round of this draft class include the likes of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Mitch Wisnowski, Amani Hooker, Ben Powers, Drew Tranquill, and Foster Moreau. Now to the 5th round of the draft, and for the 5th round, there were 2 main players that highlighted this round. The first one being linebacker Dre Greenlaw, who was taken 148th overall by the 49ers, as he has been a big piece in the 49ers front 7 and a big piece in both the 49ers runs to the Super Bowl. Of course, though, Dre Greenlaw will miss part of 2024 to start the season after he tore his Achilles in Super Bowl 58, which is a shame there. You know, speedy recovery to him. Also, Andrew Van Ginkel was taken in this round by the Miami Dolphins at pick 151. Of course, Van Ginkel, he'll now be anchoring the pass rush for the Minnesota Vikings this season in 2024. Some other notable players that were taken in the 5th round of the draft include the likes of Matt Gay, Mac Wilson, Blake Cashman, David Edwards, and Cole Holcomb. Now to the 6th round of the draft. The 6th round, the only player highlight worthy to note was the great meme quarterback of this generation, with Gardner Minshew, as his journeyman QB run began with the Jacksonville Jaguars at the 178th pick of the draft. Of course, Gardner has gone on to have stints in Philadelphia and Indianapolis as well, even coming close to leading Indianapolis to the playoffs last year after Anthony Richardson went down. Some other notable players that were taken in the 6th round include the likes of David Long, Marcus Epps, Dennis Daly, and Donovan Wilson, who have all been depth pieces in the NFL. Round 7 of the draft didn't offer a whole lot outside of just some key depth pieces on certain rosters, with the notables being Nick Allegretti, Myles Gaskin, Nick Scott, and Caden Ellis. And of course, the Mr. Irrelevant pick in this draft class, which was the 254th pick, which belonged to the Arizona Cardinals. And one of the rare instances where a team held both the first overall pick in the draft and the final pick of the draft. Pretty weird, fucked up coincidence. But yeah, anyway, the Cardinals used that pick to draft tight end Caleb Wilson. As Caleb, he ended up being just only on the practice squad for the Cardinals, as he had a brief stint with the Eagles and not much else in the NFL. And if you didn't get drafted in this draft class, it wasn't the end of the world, as now we turn to the undrafted players, as there have been quite a few undrafted players that made some Pro Bowl appearances. The first headliner being, of course, Kevontae Turpin, who made the Pro Bowl as a special teamer with the Cowboys during his stint with Dallas. Even Deontay Hardy has made a Pro Bowl appearance as a special teamer during his stint with New Orleans. Also, other noteworthy undrafted players that made some Pro Bowl appearances include the likes of Alec Ingold, A.J. Cole, and Jack Fox. Granted, Jack Fox's Pro Bowl appearance was as a member of the Detroit Lions, but his journey started with the Kansas City Chiefs here. And some other notable undrafted players that had their moments in the sun from this draft class include the likes of Patrick McCarry, Tyrell Dodson, Josh Niegman, Andrew Wingard, Jake Browning, Jacoby Miles, Carl Granderson, Andre James, TJ Edwards, and Azeez Al-Shahir all have had their moments in this league. And that, folks, is the 2019 NFL Draft Class 5 years later. Overall, there was a lot of great talent that were taken throughout later on in the draft. Like, honestly, this draft class could be a good example of why I'm against tanking in the draft. And why I really don't do mock drafts, because tanking really means nothing, and the draft is just a total fucking crapshoot, and that you can find talent literally anywhere in the draft if you have the right people calling the shots. Like, you know, that's just the mystique of the NFL draft and how much of a crapshoot it is. It's a place where players that get taken early in the draft, most of them usually don't do as well as advertised, and those taken later in the draft tend to do better than those taken well ahead of them. You know why? It's the main reason why, I don't do mock drafts. I mean, hey, if scouting was so easy, we'd all be scouts in the NFL. The draft's the one time a year where we get to pretend to be armchair general managers for a day. Or in this case, for a weekend. But yeah, that's the 2019 draft class. I might go and revisit some more draft class throughout the year, that once a year. So yeah, and I might look at revisiting the 2020 draft class, because oh boy, that 2020 draft class is something. Because the 2020 draft class, that's when shit hits the fan, literally and metaphorically. So yeah, I do think we are going to revisit the 2020 class. I think we'll do that next year. So yeah, we'll be back here in 1 year's time from now to take a look at the 2020 draft class 5 years later. But anyway, that'll wrap it up here. That's all I got to say. And enjoy the rest of your NFL offseason. I'm out.